One of my favorite verses in the Bible is Psalms 34:7. The angel of the Lord encampeth around about them that fear him and delivereth them. It was July 10, 2017, and I was on my way to church. My car started to act up, so I decided to leave it at a friend's shop and have someone come and pick me up. As I was stopped to turn left, a car hit me in the back. She was doing 65 miles an hour. She said she was playing with her radio. It shoved the back of my car into the passenger side and to the driver's seat. My friend who had the shop was also a paramedic. It was his day off and he was at church. When he heard the ambulances go by, he decided to go and see if they needed any help. When he saw it was me, he called my son Dan. And he also called the church, and they started praying for me. Dan called his dad, who called Brenda.
I also was at church. I was just about to start Sabbath school down in Needles when my husband came up and told me that we needed to go because my mother had been in a very severe accident. So the amazing thing is that before my mother was removed from the car, 2 churches were already praying for her. Amen. So it took them an hour and a half to excavate her from the car. I got home and my youngest brother who lives out here and I were trying to figure out how we were going to get back there. We called the airlines and it was just way too expensive. We couldn't afford that. His car had issues. My truck had issues. My dad's truck has issues. My husband's truck had issues. So we wound up taking, and this is a miracle, which you'll find out later, we wound up taking an off-road vehicle that was all camoed out and we just used for winter off-roading. So we got in the vehicle and it took us, we left Saturday afternoon, we got back to Tennessee early Monday morning, and we walked into the intensive care unit where my mother was, and when I looked down at her and she was all broken, she opened her eyes and she smiled like she was surprised to see me. I'm just going to tell you here the extent of her injuries. She had 7 spinal fractures. Her ribs front and back were broken. She had a brain bleed and lung contusions. So, did you want to in here? Okay. So, for 3 days she was in intensive care. I think they were trying to figure out how they were going to repair all these injuries. Her neck was broken in 2 places, her upper back in 3 and her lower in 2. So, for 3 days, finally, and when I was on the way home from church to my house to get ready to go back to Tennessee, I prayed, God, please give her good Christian doctors and nurses. And God did answer that prayer. One of the doctors that was in the 12-hour surgery that it took to repair her was the doctor of nursing from Southern College. So they took 12 hours, they put rods in her neck and they put rods in her upper back, and then they gave her a cage that clamped together to hold her lower back in place, and the recovery began. She was put into step down or critical care from intensive care.
When I was in critical care, resting, I heard them singing. I can't tell. They were singing so softly. They sang 3 songs. And every time I heard them, they were the same songs. They were so soothing. They would stop and I was comforted. They sang to me several different times, even when I moved to another place. They were the most beautiful music I'd ever heard.
I did not hear this music, by the way, so I believe she was listening to angels. to comfort her, which God sometimes sends those kind of comforts to us when we need them the most. She was very broken, and she was in a lot of pain. From step down, she was there for about 4 days, and they transferred her to rehab. In rehab, they had her up walking right away, and she amazed them by what she was able to do. Within a month, she was walking laps and even went outside and walking after this severe injury. And one of the doctor who ran the hospital, came in personally and wanted to speak with her because he had read her records, and he said, I have people that have one spinal fracture that I cannot get out of bed. So you want to tell about why you believe you were able to recover?
Yes, I believe in God's 8 laws of health. They are in the Bible, and the Spirit of Prophecy and Ministry of Healing especially is one of my favorite books. And I try hard to follow the 8 laws of health. And I believe that's why I'm alive today, because they only gave me a 30 to 40% chance of living. And I'm just very thankful to God for all His blessings.
I know that my mother, when I was a young child, she was kind of sickly. She had asthma. She had a lot of health problems, until someone in the church finally told her, you need to be following the principles that are in this book. And she was able to overcome asthma and a lot of her health issues. I remember we hiked a lot as kids, and she wouldn't be able to go with us because she couldn't breathe. And right before the accident, she was walking about 2 miles a day. She'd been on a 10-mile strenuous hike with some friends at church. So she was in good health and on no medication at all when this accident happened. And we believe that's why she was able to come through it so well, that God blessed His principles. But that's not the end of the story. She recovered, she's walking, and they finally, after a month, they released her from the hospital. And they told me, don't fly her back to Arizona, drive her, because we don't want her hitting any air turbulence. So we started off. I was very tired. I'd been with her day and night for a whole month. I don't know if you know about broken people, but they think if you just keep adjusting them, some of that pain will go away. So night and day, she'd be like, well, move me up, move me down, move me this way. And bless her heart, she was very brave. Through all of this, she was extremely brave. But I think that I was a little tired. We started off, we got to outside of Oklahoma, and she didn't want a hotel room because I had put 3 inches of memory foam in the front seat with her laying down, and she was very comfortable there. So we spent the night. I couldn't find anywhere to spend the night, so I wound up spending the night in a Walmart parking lot, which I'm going to assure you, in a vehicle, there's a lot going on, and I didn't get much sleep. So about 4 o'clock in the morning, I couldn't sleep anymore, and I just like, we got to go, Mom. And I was a little frustrated because I knew I had a long ways to go, and I was very tired. I was hoping to make Albuquerque for the Sabbath because I wanted to be somewhere pretty for the Sabbath. So I had my own agenda there. So I got up, and she's like, oh, let's have prayer before we go. Well, I was a little crabby. I was like, so I just impatiently let her say her prayer, and then we got on the road. And about 6 o'clock in Oklahoma, I started passing a truck, and I remember hearing the rumble strip, and as my brain was saying, don't yank the wheel, I yanked the wheel. So then I'm facing the truck, and I yanked the wheel the other way, and then I yank it one more time, and we started rolling down the highway in the medium. And I remember thinking 3 things. I remember thinking, I really regret this is happening. And then I remember, are we going to die? And then I thought, are we going to stop rolling? When are we going to stop rolling? And then as soon as we came to as we landed on our wheels, I just remember thinking, I killed my mother. I killed my mother. So I jumped out the window because I couldn't get the door open, and I ran around, and her side was collapsed down. So I ran back around, and there was all this smoke coming out of the engine, and I thought, oh, now the car's on fire. So all the windows were broke out, and everything had come out of the vehicle. And so I thought, she was still laying there, and I'm just frantic, too much adrenaline, and she's just, Brenda, I'm all right. Brenda, I'm all right. And I'm running around the car, like, what am I going to do? So people came up, and they had called an ambulance, and I'd called my dad, and him and my brother jumped in the truck and started back to get us. And praise the Lord, the truck held up because it had a bad wheel bearing. And so one of the amazing things is the ambulance got there, and she was already packaged to go because she had an aspen collar on in the cage, so they didn't have too much work to do. And they pulled her out, and I thought, well, I better at least find our purses. And God was just saying, as if I'm not great enough, look what I can do here, because her purse had been in the back, and my purse had been in the front. And when I found them, which only took me a minute, her purse was right here, mine was right here, her wallet was right here, my wallet was right here, her phone was right here, and my phone was right here. So I just threw them in my purse and grabbed them and jumped in the ambulance with my mother. And we went to a small community hospital, and they checked her out, and I just was praying, and I knelt down by her bed in the emergency room, and I just prayed, Lord, please do not let me have broken my mother any more than she has already broken. And she had a pretty good sized knot on her arm, so I was pretty sure that her arm was broken. And so I prayed, and they took her away to the MRI and stuff, and they came back, and they said, well, we can't really see any reason to keep her. But we're a small hospital, so we want to send you to Oklahoma Trauma Center. And so they called for a helicopter, and we rode there, and all day they looked over they got the records from her surgeries, and I could see them out there in the nurses' station, the doctors, and like it seemed half the hospital was there, and they're all going like this, going. And praise the Lord, at the end of the day, they came to us and said, well, we can see no reason to keep you, but face it, you have nowhere to go. So we're going to keep you overnight for observation. And they did. My brother and my father got there early the next morning, and they brought us home. And God sometimes intervenes in our behalf, and I know that Tammy, who is a member here, had a similar experience in that her car flipped over and over. And God is able to protect us that, because my dad towed that vehicle home, and he came in the house because he took the running gear out from under it to build another vehicle, and he had tears in his eyes, and he's like, if you knew how hard that car hit, he says, you would know that God, there was no way you could have survived that without his grace. And when we picked the car up from the impound lot, there was a truck just like mine there that rolled the same day, had nowhere near the damage that my vehicle had sustained, and that guy had died. So God knew beforehand which vehicle, he knew about my stubbornness, and he said, I better put them in this one, it'll be safer for them. So God was wonderful, and he protected us. I know that, not everybody is saved in an accident like that, but God knows our time, and he gave me more time because he realized I needed more work done on my character. And one other thing I wanted to say was, I got in the vehicle after we towed it home, and I sat in the seat, and I put my hand on my head, and the top of the car was on my head, and there was a dent in front of my head, and there was a dent in the back of my head. And I know an angel just had to have put his hand on top of my head as we were rolling. And as my dad says, your angel's got a few bruises in that one. So praise the Lord. I thank him so much for his grace and mercy in allowing us to have more time to perfect our characters and become like Jesus. Amen. Thank you.